Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Beer and Money. My name is Ryan Burklo.
And I'm Alex Collins.
And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about where can buffered ETFs fit in a financial plan. And the reason we're discussing this is, I've had several people actually reach out to me around the conversation around buffered ETFs. I think it is, given where the market and what's going on, it's become a popular product out there. And so we wanted to have a conversation around that product or that
Concept.
I guess we'll use it that way, and how that actually fits in a financial plan. So, but before we dive in there, Mr. Collins, what are you drinking?
Today, I am drinking Sheesh Hazy IPA. It's from Heady Alice, local brewery. Shocking. We're drinking a Hazy IPA.
I went with a classic Guinness. I don't know why, but I saw it in the store the other day. I'm like, that sounds delightful. So Guinness is one of my favorite beers ever out there. So that's mine. But I'm curious. I've never heard of your beer. How is it?
It is not bad. This
Where's
is
it out of?
Heady Alice. It is out of it's out of Portland.
There you go. Well, Portland makes good beer. Not a fan of the city, but makes good beer.
The town makes really good beer.
Yeah. So, well, lovely. Well, let's dive into this here, Alex. So, first, before we dive into strategy or financial planning, let's actually talk about what are the buffered profit products, right? What does that even mean?
Yeah. So, at a high level, what this is doing is it's trying to give you equity exposure, usually based on some kind of an index or some equity type portfolio. It's usually good for up to a certain cap, and then it's designed to try and reduce or eliminate the downside risk. So we saw these products come out with fixed equity indexed annuities. Then it moved to a product called RILAs. We've seen it in structured notes. We've seen it now in buffered ETFs and buffered UITs. For any ETFs or exchange traded funds, UITs are unit investment trusts. Yeah, exactly. So
what I heard you just say real quick, right? Cap, right? All the terminology that you and I effectively know like the back of our hand. Cap may not mean much to our listeners, right? So I'm going to repeat what Alex just said. Right, these products are essentially they're allowing for the upside inside of the market. Maybe it's inside of an index like the S&P 500, for example. But they cap it out, meaning if the S&P 500 does 20%, right, they might cap you at 10. Meaning, even though the S&P did 20% rate of return, you're only getting 10. That's the cap. And the reason there's a cap is because they limit the downside.
Yep. And
right. So let's talk about the downside now, right? Because there are several different variations of that.
Before we leave the cap, sometimes the cap is a 1-year cap, sometimes it's a multi-year cap.
Right.
It's one of those things where you might see like a 50% cap and you're like, holy crap, that's unlimited, like effectively unlimited. And it might be over, say, a 5-year time period. And so it's not,
which is only 10% per year.
Right. And so it doesn't necessarily
cumulative.
Right. Over the entire 5-year or whatever the time period is. So be aware of how these different things are calculated and structured. We also need to get a sense of like, okay, what is it like? What are we actually looking at? What's the historical norm on these various different things? Does it lock in every year? Yes, no, maybe. And like, there are going to be different caps depending upon the downside protection. Sometimes it is 100% downside protection, meaning that we can't from an underlying investment standpoint lose money. And I was very careful with the wording there, the underlying investment. Now, if the product, whatever version or flavor it is, has fees, or you're paying your advisor a fee, if you get a 0% rate of return and there's a fee, you've lost money.
there's that possibility of losing money, right? But in the investment portion, like you just mentioned, that's where maybe you don't lose any portion there.
Correct. So it's important to understand. You can see downside, risk at like, hey, they're going to absorb the first 5% or 10% or 15%. There is a virtual unlimited amount of smorgasbord
Yeah,
that you
there's
can do
soft
here.
versus hard downside risk, right? And let's define that real quick because I think that is a confusing part, and we could probably do the whole episode on going through this product line, and that's not the point. The point is discussing where it might fit inside of a financial plan. But I do think they should understand that the soft versus hard, right? So if we're utilizing a product that has maybe a soft, uh, call it 20%, right? Meaning downside, it protects you at 20% soft, right? So if you're at 19% negative, then you're protected. But if you get to if the market or that index is down 25%, you're fully down 25%. So it's a soft protection, meaning you're protected up till 20%. But if it goes back below 20%, now you're actually down that full amount.
Right.
Versus a
Whereas,
hard is if it's a hard 20, no matter what, you're protected 20% downside risk. And if it gets to 25%, like I just in my previous example, you're only down 5%.
yep.
Right. So that's a big difference between soft and hard.
And then the other thing to know about, like, each one of these products works a little bit differently. Most of the time you have to keep it for the entire length of time that the cap or the guarantee is
Yeah.
in place. So for example, if you're in a buffered ETF and the buffer is, say, 10%, and we just went through a ton of volatility and the market's down 8%, with the underlying investment is going to be down something at that point,
Yep.
because the likelihood of being down more than 10% over that, whatever that time period is, 1 year, year and a half, 2 years, whatever the time period is, if you're down 8% in the first 2 months, like, it's going to affect the potential negative outcome. And we don't wind up getting that buffer until the end of that time period. Usually it depends on the product. So you got to understand what you've got. We also need to be really careful of like all of these engineered indexes. There's a whole bunch of engineered indexes where it's all backwards looking, of like somebody created an index looking backwards going, hey, this performed really, really well
Had
over the
I
last
invested
5
in this
years.
mix, it would have done well. So it's not an actual index out there. It's a made up index based on performance looking backwards. You don't know, like, right? What does every investment portfolio, what's their disclosure in there, right? Past performance is not indicative of future performance, right? But they're literally doing that and selling it in that way, and that can be an issue for sure.
Yeah.
So let's transition, Alex, into the financial planning piece of this. So how does this fit inside of a financial plan? And we're going to go through two different examples. The first example is, how does this go into from the standpoint of, if you're 5 years away from retiring, for example, how could you utilize a buffered product?
Yeah. At one, like, first of all, how do we know that we're 5 years away? Like, that might be what we're
I mean, that's up
planning.
for, yeah, that,
Um,
right.
and like, I would suggest
However,
that,
I'll just put that real quick, though. I do want to say this because this is a conversation that I know we both have had with many of our clients as of late, and or prospective clients is maybe more specifically the terminology I should use. And the fact is so many people, like right now, 2025, so many people have allowed their financial plan to essentially allow rate of return to choose when they retire.
Mhm.
Right? Like, what's weird about when the market's down, you and I get actually busier with newer clients because now, right? Before, when the market's going up, 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 you could throw a dart and like, oh, look, I don't need a financial planner because look, I can get a rate of return, right? Now, when the markets go down, now it's like, oh, wait a minute, maybe there's some stuff I don't know or didn't plan for, right? And our statement is we'd never allow, and our clients would never want this either. Do you really want to allow rate of return to choose how much money you take in retirement or the day that you can retire?
Yeah. Well, and like, not only have we seen volatility, but we've also seen a good amount of layoffs. And so it's
Yep.
like, okay, well, now if you got laid off in your 62 and you were planning on sticking around until 64, like, okay, do you just pull the ripcord and retire? Is now a time that we can retire because of what's going on with the markets and things of that nature? And the answer, like this buffered structure now becomes a piece of that solution. There are a couple clients that we've got right now who are like, they're like, hey, I know that I can retire, but like, I'm kind of enjoying what I'm doing. It's fun and I'm getting paid a decent amount to do it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm going to keep working for another year or two, even though like,
I'm going to keep working until they don't want me type of right
right.
mentality.
Or until it's no longer fun.
Right.
Um, and so for that, where we wind up with this like really goofy like timeline where we don't know, it's going to be somewhere in the next 1 to 4 years, maybe. Now this type of a solution becomes a great solution because we still have some upside potential, which when clients are working, volatility usually works in their favor, and they understand like, hey, I need to make sure that I'm getting to a point where I've got safety, I've got liquidity, I've got the ability to withstand some of these market fluctuations, because we don't know when the next recession is coming, just that it is at some point.
Yep.
So it's one of those things where this now becomes an easy solution where we can go ahead and protect ourselves on the downside and at the same time still get some upside. Now, this isn't all of the portfolio. This is a
Yeah, let's say
piece
I
of
was going
it.
to interrupt you and say we're not saying that you should put all of your money in this type of strategy or product. It's maybe something to consider with some of your money, right? Like our last episode, we spoke about liquidity and make sure we've got right buckets that are not correlated with the market.
Right.
That's not the bucket we're talking about. This bucket is correlated with the market,
Right.
right? But it might be a secondary bucket of money that maybe this is the bucket of money we touch in different instances, right? Like to your, we were talking earlier to recording this around if our first couple years in are as we're getting closer to retirement is maybe getting negative, right? Well, now our concern is, okay, when's it coming back? So we could touch the bucket of money that's not correlated with the market. Maybe that's the first bucket of money that we touch, but how nice would it be to have a secondary bucket of money that is also available? Because maybe this is up a little bit more than, right? It just gives that flexibility piece.
Right. Or like if the example that I think we were talking about was like, okay, imagine if we had a 20% buffered structure and the market was down 15% year one and down 10% year two, and then up, single digits and mid to high single digits year three. What we don't necessarily want to pull out of the market-based portfolio in year three because we're still collectively
Yeah.
down. But at the same time, something like this,
In
where
this
like, okay,
buffered product, we'd be collectively up.
right. We would have absorbed year one. We would have absorbed year two in the hypothetical that we gave. And then year three, we're actually up. And so at the end of year three, we wouldn't have any problem liquidating a portion or all of this bucket, while still deferring some of the truly market-based investments that we're going to hold for the next, 5 to 40 years. Or if we're waiting to be able to get to a guaranteed income stream or to allow the market to come back or things of this nature, it now gives us more choice and more flexibility. So it's an extra tool in the toolbox. And it fits in the partially correlated to the
Yep.
market, where it's definitely market correlated, but it's not a 1-to-1 market correlation. We wind up with some significant diversification depending upon like, okay, what is it we're trying to do and how much of a shock do we want to absorb? What are we trying to get from an upside standpoint? And most of the time it's that teeter totter, right? The more buffer that we accept, the lower that we're expecting in terms of rate of return. The less buffer we expect, the more rate of return, or the more cap that we wind up getting as an offset.
Right. And really the same philosophy holds like the second example we're going to talk into is you're already into retirement. Like it's the same thing we've been talking about, right? It's having that that buffer shocker, right? That's
They
right.
actually
That
got this
buffer,
one right in the
right?
naming.
that buffer of flexibility in retirement when you're pulling money. So again, this is building in the strategy and the different concepts that we've been talking about. And one thing that I think oftentimes you and I will get questioned on, because it is the fun part of the conversation. And as human beings, Alex, we are all, all of us would love to bet a bunch of money and win a bunch of money, like the lottery, the gambling perspective. Like I think all of us enjoy the thought of doing it. Now, not all of us can actually do it from the standpoint of like our mind may not actually allow us to put the bet down.
Right.
But that being said, the rate of return conversation is always, eventually this comes around in this, and some people will argue back to us, well, I'm a gambling person and I'd rather have all my money in the market. And so that way, when the market comes ramming back, we'll be able to get all the money back. And what we would say to that is two things, I think. And I'll say what's on my mind. And Alex, I'll be curious to say if you say the second thing on your mind. Number one is, if we've got assets that are not correlated with the market, or partially correlated, like in this episode, the buffered strategy, that allows us to never have to touch the other money that might be more aggressively invested, actually, because you've got these other buckets. So from a rate of return standpoint, it might be more efficient from that standpoint because you never had to touch that money and you took more risk than you otherwise would have.
Yeah.
What would you add to that? Anything, and maybe not to that particular topic, but is there anything else that bubbles up in your mind when it comes to the rate of return part of this strategy?
Yeah. Well, so it actually allows us to hold to that being more aggressive piece because we've got assets that we know are going to come due and come to fruition, where we know that we're getting, X rate of return, or this is the worst downside that we can see. And so we've got some amount of guarantees associated with whatever we're doing.
Right.
And that's the permission slip that allows us to feel comfortable with the aggressive piece, and to, allow us to roll those dice and go for it.
And I'll add one more thing to this, which is, it's going to sound a bit arrogant, I think. Shocker coming from me. But I think too many people, ourselves included, you and I have the benefit of taking several people through retirement. Like me, you and I have actually helped people get to retirement and then actually transfer over into retirement, actually taking income from their assets, right?
Well,
We've
and go
done both
through it.
sides. And we've experienced a bunch of stuff through our clients, from losses in the family, right? Like premature death, to rate of return, to all of that stuff, to even opportunistic type of stuff that has happened. And what I was going to say to this is, it's very easy to talk a big game. Like I've said it to family members when they talk about, well, I'm okay with taking more risk and yada, yada, yada. And I always remind them, well, how many times have you actually retired having taken that risk and experienced X? And of course, they have to look at me because they couldn't lie to me. Like they haven't retired yet, right? So they literally have to tell me, well, I've never experienced that. And so I then follow up with, then how do you know you'd actually do what you're saying you're going to do? You and
Yeah.
I have experienced it. Like that's the benefit of working with
What?
us, is we have experienced, I'm not going to say everything because something's going to happen that's not everything, but we've experienced a lot.
And it's funny because I've actually had that conversation with clients before, and they're like, well, you're younger than I am. How many times have you retired? And I'm like, I haven't retired, but I've helped this number of clients through retirement. And they're like, oh,
They
yeah.
forget that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'm living it alongside of the client, and I'm actually helping them make decisions as they're going through experiencing a 20% drop in the market, or as they're experiencing, like, looking at their statements going, oh crap, what's going on? And because of the way in which we do planning, most of
You
the
and I
time,
have to, like, we are in our client's shoes. Like that's the passion, that's our mission. Like if we fail, our clients financially fail, which means we're out of business. Like it just keeps going down that snowball, right? So yeah, we've done it.
Well, and we're taking on fiduciary responsibility for our clients.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's something where like we're, partially responsible for, like, we can't control the market. But at the same time, we also like need to make sure that what the decisions that we're making are prudent decisions that other people with similar situations, with similar knowledge, with similar options and opportunities, that all of these these things would be made, and we're not taking undue risk, we're not taking too little risk, we're having conversations with clients about what is the right thing to do and why.
Yep. Well, Alex, I think this is a perfect way to end this episode. Right? If you haven't checked us out on beerandmoney.net, head over to beerandmoney.net. We've got the YouTube channel, right? So you can see Alex's pretty face. And if you head up to the contact us spot, that's the great spot to email us any questions you might have from today's episodes or any other topics that you want us to talk about. So as always, we hope this episode is valuable for you. And Mr. Collins.
Cheers.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not to be construed as tax, legal, or investment advice. Although the information has been gathered from sources believed to be reliable, please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should be relied upon only when coordinated with individual professional advice. Guest speakers and their firms are not affiliated with or endorsed by Park Avenue Securities, Guardian, or Quantified Financial Partners, and opinions stated are their own. Guardian, its subsidiaries, agents, and employees do not provide tax, legal, or accounting advice. Consult your tax, legal, or accounting professional regarding your individual situation. All investments and investment strategies contain risk and may lose value. This material is intended for general public use. By providing this content, Park Avenue Securities LLC is not undertaking to provide investment advice or a recommendation for any specific individual or situation, or to otherwise act in a fiduciary capacity. Please contact a financial representative for guidance and information that is specific to your individual situation. Ryan and Alex are registered representatives and financial advisors of Park Avenue Securities LLC, OSJ 200 Market Street, Suite 1850, Portland, Oregon 97201. Phone number 503-221-1226. Securities products and advisory services offered through Park Avenue Securities, member FINRA, SIPC. Financial representatives of the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, Guardian, New York, New York. Park Avenue Securities is a wholly owned subsidiary of Guardian. Quantified Financial Partners is not an affiliate or subsidiary of Park Avenue Securities or Guardian. Ryan Burklo, CA Insurance License Number 0K24924. Alexander Collins, CA Insurance License Number 0H24806.
7913212.1. Expiration date April 2027.